I'm so glad you're here this afternoon. We have all kinds of good things to talk about. If you are sitting in what I call the peanut gallery, which is the seats outside of the big kids table, please feel free to move up to the big kids table. We've got plenty of room, and we have lots of things to talk about, and I would love to be able to hear what you have to say. I spent part of last week and part of this morning listening to the special session on emergency planning and flooding for the state. Very happy to see you here because one of the issues that's coming out of those hearings is a lack of communication and coordination among folks that have emergency response responsibilities. And so I'm happy to have y'all here. What we're sharing with you today is a project we've been working on for a little bit. And it's also, and I don't know where my slides went. It's also a result of some things that our new director had us present to the executive board. Because there have been lots of questions about, well, what are you doing in North Texas? So we are also, this is the little ping noise you hear is folks that are joining us online. Welcome. This is a hybrid meeting. We are also recording this meeting. So if you have colleagues that you would like to share the meeting with, it will be posted on our TSI website. If you are not speaking, just so that we don't get a lot of extraneous noise, please keep your microphone on mute. If you're online, raise your hand. If you're here in the room, there's on the microphone in front of you, there's a little thing that looks like a head with waves coming out of it. Push that and it will turn on your microphone. Also, if you are either a floodplain manager or a professional engineer that would like continuing education credits, let us know. We will be sending out certificates after the meeting. So thank you for joining us. This is our agenda. As you can see, that's why I'm starting promptly at 1 o'clock. We got lots to talk about. I'm very excited. We have some really, really good speakers from across the region that are going to be sharing information with you as well. And with that, I think we'll dive in. I'm Sue Alvarez. I'm the Director of Environment Development. I will tell you that we also have Dr. Maribel Martinez sitting in today. She is our Director of Emergency Preparedness. So if you have hard questions that I can't answer, I'm going to hide and let her answer them. So, shameless plug. For those of you who don't know much about the COG, we are a voluntary association by and for local governments. We've been in this role since 1966, which is a pretty long time. We typically plan for common needs and concerns. We do serve as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for North Texas. We funnel grants on behalf of the state. And really, we hone in on collective cooperation among the various cities, counties, school districts, water districts, you name it. We are one of the larger COGs in the United States, and we serve. And with that, the other shameless plug is this is out of our presentation to our executive board. The question is, what are y'all doing around flooding to help with emergency response? And this is a kind of a global list of the things that we do within our department related to flooding. Now, we do lots of other things as well. We'll talk about a few of those things today. If you want more information, feel free to go to our website or ask us. We're happy to share because we're proud of the work we're doing. Probably one of the most critical things that we've done, and it's a project that's been around since the late 90s, is the Trinity River Common Vision. That is a program that generally looks to prevent the normal increase in flooding as we develop across the region by looking towards no rise. And so projects in and along the Trinity that have the potential to impact our watershed characteristics are reviewed. So we have 10 cities, 4 counties, our programmatic partners, and 2 special districts that all participate in this voluntary effort to collaborate on local development in such a way that we're developing smarter and so that our downstream neighbors don't get flooded by what we do in the upstream parts of our watershed. One piece of that is our friends in transportation also do a lot of complementary work as they look at traffic and transportation and transit issues and projects. They have a lot of programs that they're actively incorporating into the transportation infrastructure, trying to make our efforts as a whole a little bit more greener. Brandon Wheeler is going to be talking a little bit more about
Okay, so we now have audio back for the folks who are online. My name is Kate Zielke. I'm a program manager with NCT COG's Environment and Development Department. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of our transportation and stormwater infrastructure study. This workshop is under the auspices of that study. And after that overview, we will have a brief pre-workshop survey. So on one evening in 1949, 11 inches of rain fell in Fort Worth. Numerous people died and millions of dollars in damage were incurred. Multiple similar storms occurred in the first half of the 1900s. This led to the development of what is now the Tarrant Regional Water District and the Fort Worth District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. However, despite their efforts to mitigate flooding, as you can see in this photo, we do still experience flooding here in north central Texas. Those 2 agencies I just mentioned are partners with NCT COG and other entities on the Integrating Transportation and Stormwater Infrastructure study. The study area for TSI includes 8 counties and 85 cities or towns. The counties, which we're really interested in today, are projected to grow in population by as much as 42% by 2050. The TSI study itself looks at further growth projections or a growth scenario through 2070. This image here shows some of the impacts of that growth. On the vertical axis, we have stream flow, and that vertical bright blue line is the construction of Lake Benbrook, which was designed to mitigate flooding. But you can see that after the construction, gradually over time, the flood risk has increased due to the urbanization in the watershed. Much infrastructure that's created to mitigate flooding is built to the designed rainfall for Dallas-Fort Worth, indicated with that horizontal bar on this image. But you can see dating back to 1900 and in more recent events that we have greatly exceeded that rainfall amount. I mentioned earlier that we have a growth scenario through 2070. That is reflected here in these two images projecting impervious surface increases through the year 2070. The TSI study area is outlined in that black polygon on these images. It was chosen based on watershed boundaries and NCT COGS boundaries. And while the more developed parts of North Central Texas region, of course, are developing and greatly increasing in imperviousness, even those areas in the study area are expected to increase due to suburbanization and even urbanization. So an overview of the TSI study, it is a planning effort. It is very unique because it seeks to integrate transportation, stormwater, and environmental planning. And while the more populated areas are outside the study area, they do stand to benefit from a reduced risk in flooding due to mitigation efforts within the study area. The study will make policy recommendations to empower communities and give them a menu of options to choose from. The hydrologic and hydraulic modeling work is very innovative in this study. And we also plan to produce planning level design options to integrate transportation and stormwater infrastructure. There are many moving pieces to the study. We launched an extensive literature review and began collecting data. Some of this data is incorporated into the H&H modeling work, which in turn will inform us which transportation infrastructure, both now and in the future, is at risk of flooding. We're going to look at mitigation options, including those related to environmental planning. We're going to look at integrating H&H data into real-time flood warning systems, and again, empower communities through stakeholder engagement and policy recommendations. We'll continue conducting stakeholder engagement, including workshops like these and visits to individual communities through the end of this year. And into early 2026, we'll be completing our H&H work and policy recommendations. Spring of 2026 is an important time for this study because we will be going out to stakeholders with our initial results to seek your feedback. In summer of 2026, we'll incorporate that feedback into our final products and wrap up the study. All of those activities require a lot of partners and a lot of funders, so we're very grateful for all the folks who are working with us and all the folks who have provided us funding for the project. And here's that pre-workshop survey. If you all want to pull out your phones and take that, we will pause for a couple of minutes so you can do so. Okay, well, while folks are wrapping up their survey, I'll move on. So next, Sue and I will talk about the importance of county watershed and stormwater management. The original inspiration for this particular workshop was a roundtable conducted by NCT COG on 2 days back in 2017. And in this roundtable, county staff discussed their abilities to adopt floodplain management standards that went beyond the minimums of the National Flood Insurance Program. And the group developed a menu of standards to address new development in county areas. Following this roundtable, COG's executive board endorsed a recommendation for counties to adopt a resolution and implement the standards. So this is the list of standards. And many of these are addressed in the transportation and stormwater infrastructure study. After the roundtable, Dallas County did adopt these standards, and a number of other communities throughout the region do adopt some of these as well. So let me turn it over to Sue to discuss how the TSI study is complementary to communities meeting their stormwater permit requirements.
Thanks, Kate. Those of you that have known me for a little while know that I got my start with the COG working as the stormwater program manager for the city of Dallas. At the time, they were in a consent decree, and I was told if I screwed up, I was out of a job, no pressure. So I learned the stormwater world. City of Dallas is a phase 1 city, but through my efforts there, I worked on the Regional Stormwater Coordinating Council, and most of the folks that participate in that group are phase 2 cities, smaller cities. So became familiar with both of the phase 1 and phase 2 municipal stormwater, separate stormwater sewer system, MS4 for short, because otherwise that's a mouthful permit. These permits come out of the Clean Water Act, and it basically delegates responsibility and authority for Clean Water Act compliance from the EPA to the state to the local governments. And so most cities over the size of about 10,000 residents have some form of this type of permitting. These permits focus around water quality. However, particularly in the phase 1 permits, there is an emphasis on what they call post-construction controls, which is EPA speak for green infrastructure, and ways of having your permanent stormwater infrastructure to help promote good water quality. And so a lot of the work we do here at the COG is supporting our local governments in compliance with those permits. And as we started working with the TSI project, we realized that, hey, this is going to help our local governments with their permit stuff. Mainly the phase 2 cities, they have requirements for developing policy around those same post-construction runoff controls. In addition to efforts around, and this is in the phase 1 permits as well, around flood control and infrastructure, both. So there is a lot of work that we're doing as part of the transportation and stormwater infrastructure project that directly supports local permit compliance under your stormwater permit. So one of the things that we have done is as we started looking at how we at the COG could better support our local governments, MCM is a minimum control measure. It's like one of the few things that you can do or have to do as outlined in your permit. So construction site runoff is a huge deal for most cities. There's the infamous contractor statement of the only time we ever have problems is when it rains. Well, yeah, that's why we do this. So as we look at our TSI project, we're looking for regional recommendations for stormwater management, and that might be model ordinances and contracts. It might be guidance documents. It might be checklists. That's where we got most of our feedback in that 2019 survey, in addition to providing training. And so we've been working under those two premises ever since, and the TSI study can help with both of these. Additionally, we did a follow-up in 2024, and a majority of these sites relative to public education indicated that, or the majority of the respondents, I guess I should say, really feel like we need to work more with developers and or construction site operators to get their permit requirements relative to limiting offsite runoff from their sites. The pollutants of most concern is sediment from construction. People are always worried about pet waste, except for the park departments that put dog parks right by the creek because that's where they got good land. Illegal disposal, what I would call illicit disposal, which is things like tire dumps, are concerned. A lot of people are concerned with litter, and that's probably the most visible piece that most residents understand relative to pollution. A lot of the other pollutants are largely invisible, and so they don't resonate with most residents. Grass clippings and leaf litter, of course, are an ongoing challenge as well. So we anticipate that the outreach that we're doing as a part of the TSI project may also address some of these other water quality concerns. So the synergies and where we're hoping that this project will help local governments. The big one is model ordinances. What we're looking at in this project is that we have an opportunity to build smarter, not necessarily status quo with how we've done development. Having worked in Dallas, they are building a $326 million tunnel because there's no place for the water to go. It would be really cool if some of the other developing areas of our region kind of thought about that sort of thing before they fully developed, so that they don't end up having to tunnel their way out, because that's the expensive way to go. So public education and outreach is always top of mind as we look at what happened in the Hill Country. I don't think you can actually really do enough outreach and education on the importance of effective stormwater management and flood control. Working with our developers. Some of the developers are pretty excited about incorporating green infrastructure into their projects. It is part of their marketing scheme. Some not so much. So we're trying to kind of work with the development community so that we don't come up with great ideas for flood control that get immediately shut down. And last but not least, we're working with the Texas Water Development Board and others for identified funding strategies. So we're hoping that we get projects coming out of this that will help reduce flooding from the development that we know is coming in our ex-urban counties, and do it in a way where we can incorporate green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. And with that, I would like to introduce my friend Stephanie Griffin, who is actually the president of the Texas Floodplain Managers Association, among her other titles. And she's going to talk about waterfront property that nobody really wants.
Thank you, Sue. All right. So a little background on me. Is this working? Get closer. Okay. And squat down. Okay, so just a little bit of background on me. I am with Half Associates. I've got Sam Sarkar here with me. We're both working on the TSI North project, and we are doing this outreach to try to help you as counties understand what the flood risks are, what the regulatory authorities are that have been associated or assigned, allocated, authorized. There we go. We're going to find that right A word to the counties. I have worked as a floodplain administrator for a city in the past, and I know that the cities and counties authorities are different. And so I don't claim to be an expert on all the authorities that counties have. That being said, we have other folks in the room today who are working for counties and they serve in that role. And so I would like you all to consider us a group that is a resource to you. So if we get into some questions at some point, you are more than welcome to have these conversations and use us to try to help understand these opportunities. All right. Just kidding. I'm pointing at the screen instead of it. Okay, it picked up too fast. There we go. All right, so today's agenda, I've got a brief introduction, the need for infrastructure regulation for counties, and really the why. Why do we have regulatory authorities allocated to the counties? Counties' legal authority in terms of infrastructure regulations, and then recommendation for future actions. Okay, so we're going to jump in here. Purpose today is to make sure that you understand that as county representatives that you do have authorities that have been allocated to you from the legislature, and that you can use those legislative authorities to take proactive approaches to mitigate risk as you are preparing to develop your counties in a manageable, a sustainable manner. And there was a handout and it looks something like this. I know Kate took it and did some little fancy work to it, but there's a handout that has some of the bullet points from the slides today, and it is intended for you to take it with you as a resource. If we ran out or if you're online, we'll be sure to post a PDF of this with the program so that you'll have all that information. But when we get into the details of the different authorities that are granted to counties, I've got the website addresses that will take you, you'll have to type in the whole URL, but it will take you to the place in the codes that allow you to access that information in case you want to dig into that further. Okay, so let's get into the why. Why are we worried about infrastructure regulation in counties? So this is a image that is in the 2050 mobility plan that North Central Texas Council of Governments has prepared. And if you look at the image here, it shows the change in population density. And the darker the color, the more population that we are expecting to increase between 2025 and 2050. And so you can see that the growth is expected to happen outside the central heart there of Dallas and Fort Worth. It's the county areas, the unincorporated areas. That's where people are going. We have about 500,000 people a day, not a day, sorry. Every time I start off that way. We have about 500,000 people a year that are moving to Texas. About 200,000 of those are moving into the metropolitan areas. So that means 300,000 people a year are moving to the unincorporated areas. And you all as county representatives are going to deal with that if you are not already dealing with that. They're coming for you. They like the open space. They like the larger lots. They like to be out where they have some space to breathe. And so living out in the unincorporated areas is very appealing to them. So we would just have to keep that in mind, that we want to be sure that you are able to establish some proactive measures so that you are developing in a sustainable manner so that what happens in the future, what you do today does not create a problem for you in the future. So back in 2000, we had a population estimate of about 5.2 million people in the 16 county COG area. In 2020, that was about 7.7 million people. And in 2050, that's projected to be almost double that at 12.3 million people. So that's a lot of people coming to the area. And you can see by the darker colors, they are moving to the outer areas, the unincorporated areas of counties. So the image here shows what our 2026 population looks like and where those concentrations of people are living. The darker the color, the more concentrated the population is, and that makes sense. I'd like you to take a look at there's kind of a palish greenish color there, and then there's a light blue color. So the light blue color is our suburban areas, and the palish greenish color is what is called exurban areas. So this is what it looks like today. And then this slide shows what it's projected to look like in 2050. So those ex-urban areas are going to become the suburban areas. And these are largely in the unincorporated areas of counties. And so we want to be sure that you have the tools and resources at your hands to develop in a sustainable manner and that you're ready to meet those needs before they get to you. How many of you were here in 2015, here in the DFW area? How many of you dealt with any of the 2015 flooding? Yay, yeah, not fun, not fun. And I'm definitely in that role too, or served in that role too. And so I understand the challenges that come with that. We are very much aware of what's happening in the Hill Country earlier this month, and then in San Antonio last month. And we have had flooding here in North Texas this summer, or in the spring. So we have a history of flooding, and our floods typically end our droughts, but we go from one extreme to the other. That's just how Texas seems to work with its weather pattern. Causes a lot of damage, causes lots of problems. And so this is just an image of a road that got washed out. It was a low water crossing, may not have been a low water crossing at the time, but it may have been a storm exceedance that exceeded the design of that infrastructure. Looking at August of 2022, North Central Texas received about 10 inches of rain, and it came in a hurry. Dallas responded to 195 high water incidents with 39 swiftwater rescues. Fort Worth responded to 133 high water calls in 24 hours. Those are the big cities. So at a community or at a county level, you likely have a more limited staff. You don't have as big of a staff as some of the bigger cities necessarily. And so you also have to deal with these same types of floods and deal with the response. And so we just are showing some of the impacts that we've seen in the North Texas area. It affects you too, and I know that, and I get that. And so there's this history of flooding that we just need to be aware of and be proactive in trying to reduce those flood impacts in the future. As I mentioned, in 2025, between April and June, we had a number of significant rain events that happened here in North Texas. And this image that is on the screen represents the rain and stream gauge information that gets pulled into the dashboard that sits on the North Central Texas Council of Governments website. And so that's available for anyone to view. If you have an interest in a flood early warning system, the Council of Governments has a contract that's available for you all to look at and potentially implement in your community. And so that is something that if you participate in that program, then you can then send that information back to the dashboard so that everyone within the 16 county area can see what's happening. Okay, so now for the county's legal authority over infrastructure. I know this is very exciting, isn't it? If you have questions, feel free to interrupt along the way. So you all as county representatives know your structure, but for those who are joining us and maybe this is their first introduction to how counties are structured, this is just a quick overview. You've got 5 elected officials. You have your county judge, and then you have your 4 county commissioners, and the 5 together make up your county commissioners court. And they are the ones who make the decisions for the entire county. So the applicable legal documents that we're going to be focusing on today that relate to what your authorities are as county representatives are the Texas Constitution, and then specific codes that come out of the Texas Revised Civil Statutes Annotated. That's a very long title. I didn't pick it. That is a long list of codes that you have to dig through to figure out what your authorities might be. So I have a cheat sheet for you. We've already done the digging. I've got the website addresses typed in there. So yes, you're gonna have to type them all in, but at least you can type it in and go look at the specific codes for each of the topics that we're going to be talking about with transportation, water, and environment. So you've got that as a resource that you can use after this workshop. The Texas Association of Counties developed a 2023 guide to Texas laws for county officials. This is available on their website, and their website URL is included in this little packet that we've provided to you. Keep in mind that these are the authorities that were granted as of the 2023 legislative session. I am hopeful that the Texas Association of Counties will develop an updated version for 2025 legislative activities that may have impacted the county's authorities. It is definitely a resource and tool that I encourage you to take a look if you're looking to expand your reach. And a significant piece of the next few slides is based off of the information that is prepared and presented in that report. So we're going to look at transportation infrastructure. Counties have a lot of authority here. You may not realize it, but you do. You can appoint a county road engineer. I don't know if all of you have that or not. If you don't, maybe that's something you ought to look at and see what that would entail. You can regulate subdivisions. There are limitations, and I understand that, but you still have some abilities to regulate those. Roads and bridges, and the interconnection with roads and bridges and the drainage that is tied to them. And that's what the TSI study is looking at, is where is the growth going to be? What are those transportation routes going to look like? What is the drainage infrastructure needing to address that, and making sure that we take into account the environmental impacts of the projected growth. So these are all things that are available to you. You can acquire equipment, resources, you can form intergovernmental agreements, you can participate in the programs that the North Central Texas Council of Governments offers. So those are all opportunities for you. And you, of course, can partner with TxDOT. So the next question that always comes up is, okay, well, you say I can do these things, how am I going to pay for this? I get it. Funds are limited, and every community runs into that challenge. So these are some things that have been granted to you in terms of funding. You can form road districts. You can issue bonds for transportation projects. You have the ability to levy taxes to pay back those bonds, and you can impose ad valorem taxes. Additionally, you can also pursue grants. A word of caution on grants: if you have something that needs to be done quickly, grants are not a fast-moving way to get there. Just a word of warning. It is a way to get there if you have some patience and you have time. If you have an emergency need, grants are really going to be a challenge for you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about grants along the way. But those are some potential funding opportunities for you to consider. On the environmental side of things, what you can do in terms of regulation, they're pretty much centered around parks and areas around lakes. So park areas, and you can regulate zoning around lakes. You can develop parks, you can acquire parks, you can improve parks, you can have parks that serve multiple purposes. So maybe it's a park that also serves as a flood detention or a flood retention facility. There are a variety of things you can do here. Again, you can work with other governmental agencies and form partnerships. You can regulate junk and refuse. No one should be dumping their tires and whatever else in your parks. that shouldn't be happening. You have the ability to enforce the cleanup of that activity. And so it does take some coordination, and it takes coordination with a variety of other folks within your counties, but it's definitely something that I would encourage you to look into. If you're running into a problem with that, please talk to your counterparts within your organizations. And then protecting water quality. We all have, can't speak for everybody. I have a passion for water quality, and you'll see this pop up on a couple of slides, and I'll explain more about the water quality here in just a minute. So again, we get back to, okay, so how do I fund any of this? The funding is a little bit more limited here. It's admission to parks and museums and revenue bond, or issuing revenue bonds for parks. You can do that. There are grants that you can go after. Again, just that word of warning on grants that it's a slow moving process, but it is an opportunity for you. Okay, and then water resources. So this is where we're dealing more with the National Flood Insurance Program and the authorities that are granted to you as counties to regulate at the NFIP minimum standards or above. I am a huge proponent of higher standards, and a lot of the programs, including the CDC program that Sue was talking about earlier, encourages higher standards with maintaining valley storage and base flood elevations plus something. And so trying to get that freeboard in there to try to protect that what is being built today is not tomorrow's flood problem. So you can contract for flood control projects, including dams and reservoirs. You can create drainage districts. You can and should be maintaining emergency programs. So there, if you're not already talking to the folks in your emergency management side of your county, that is a resource that you should probably reach out to and make sure that y'all are on the same page. Leverage each other's information, leverage each other's abilities to work together on all of this. You can develop guidance for the future. You can develop water plans. You can develop watershed master plans, drainage master plans. You can do all of those things. And then again, protecting water quality. And we have, I say we, the COG has, I feel like I'm part of the COG sometimes. The COG has the iSwim program that we were, or that I can't remember now if it was Kate or Sue was mentioning earlier. And that program integrates not only the stormwater quality, the quantity of stormwater runoff, but also the quality of it in natural solutions, best management practices to help improve the water quality as it's running off sites before it enters into our natural systems. Ultimately, we all need water, and the stormwater runoff becomes part of our water supply in one form or another. It's either seeping into the ground and becoming part of the groundwater supply, or it is going downstream into a reservoir and becomes part of our surface water supply. The more we do now to improve the water quality, particularly the stormwater quality as it's running off sites, the less water, the less that we have to do when it comes to water treatment. And so the cost of water treatment goes down. And so that is something to keep in mind when you are looking at your water resources opportunities. So again, back to funding opportunities, you can issue bonds and you can levy taxes to construct these lakes and reservoirs. You can also obtain grants, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about grants here in a few minutes on something in particularly related to the water resources side of the world. All right, and then you have some additional legal authorities, and that includes leveraging public-private partnerships. I don't know how many of you have tried that. Something that's an opportunity out there. If you get a developer that's coming in and you want them to meet some higher standards, work with them, see what you can do to come up with a solution that works for both you as the county and them as the developer. You can collaborate with other governments. Again, the COG has lots of programs and opportunities that you can reach into and participate with and implement in your programs. You do have the ability to utilize eminent domain. It is typically the very last option on your list of things that you prefer to do. And so it is not used frequently, but it is something that you have the authority to do. So recommendations for future actions. Participate in the TSI project. If you are interested in learning more about how transportation and stormwater and environmental impacts are all considered in a planning effort, this TSI effort covers all of that. And if you are not in the North and West study areas right now, but you want to be considered for the future, my recommendation is that you contact Kate and let her know that your county is interested in participating in this in the future. The Council of Governments is hopeful that they can take this approach and implement it across the whole COG area and not just at these two areas. So if it's something you're interested in, please let Kate know. She would add you to her waiting list. I guess you have a waiting list. I know she's heard from other entities and communities. So if your county is interested in this, particularly if you see the development and where it's coming and that impacts you, this is an opportunity for you to be proactive in that. You can establish the regulations that account for that rapid growth so that you are prepared when that growth gets to you. If the growth is already here and it's happening now in your area, you feel like maybe you're behind the curve, it's okay. You can start now. You can start somewhere. Develop a regional flood plan if you don't already have one, and that includes a watershed master plan. Incorporate and participate with the communities that are in your counties. So you've got the opportunity there to leverage information that they already have, maybe expand existing models, coming up with solutions that work within the whole county and benefit all that are participating. Incorporate that environmental considerations when you're looking at this. There are lots of opportunities to do that. I know we talked primarily about parks, but there are other ways. The I-Swim program is one. There's a Tri-Swim program as well. There are a variety of opportunities there. Participate in the regional and state flood plan. Now, this won't surprise Kate or Sue that I'm about to put a plug in here for regional and state flood planning. A lot of the Council of Governments area is within the Trinity Regional Flood Plan, and I'm very involved with it. So is Sue, and I think Kate gets to be drug into it some. If your county is not located within the Trinity watershed boundary, that's okay. I can help you figure out which watershed boundary you're located, and maybe your county spans multiple, and I can connect you with the appropriate people so that you can get your desired actions in the plans. How many of you are familiar with the regional flood planning? Okay, oh good, I see more hands. Okay, and I'm not trying to call anyone out, but for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the regional and statewide flood planning, it is a bottom-up flood planning process, and so it takes local information, the local watershed plans, the local needs that have been identified in terms of studies, projects, strategies. What is it that the local entities need? And counties are local entities, and they are encouraged and invited to participate in this planning effort. The state of Texas has been divided into 15 regions. All of those regions roll up to become the statewide flood plan. And the recommendations in that plan then are eligible to go after Texas Water Development Board funding. So I told you I'd talk about more about funding. So here it is. Texas Water Development Board has the Flood Infrastructure Fund, and it is something that is designated for stormwater and flood mitigation studies, projects, and strategies. And so strategies may be flood early warning systems, could be buyouts, could be, you know what, we don't have a drainage criteria manual and we really would need some help creating that. Okay, there's an opportunity to put that in the regional flood plans. So those plans are required to be updated every 5 years. So right now, all the regional flood planning groups, all 15 of them across the state, are working on their 2028 plan. They are soliciting input for actions to be included in this plan. And the actions that your county may have, maybe you have a study that you'd like to do, maybe you have a low water crossing, you already have the design for it. You just need some money to help get it implemented. Reach out and let us know, and we will be happy to connect you to the right people, to the right planning group, so that you get that action included in the plan. Most of the planning groups are taking action or requests for actions right now, and those are closing at the end of the summer or possibly even into September. The time frame to participate, even though it's called a 2028 flood plan, the time to get your ideas in that plan is now. And so just want to be sure that you all have that opportunity so that in the future you will be able to go after that Texas Water Development Board funding. And then if you do have flood plans, I encourage you to implement those actions that are in those plans. Maybe restudy them. If those plans are 20 years old or 10 years old even, maybe they're not meeting what your needs are today. Maybe they met your needs back then, and maybe it's time to look at those again. Hazard mitigation plans. This is something that I double checked before I came. All of the counties in here have, or in the COG region, have a hazard mitigation plan. Some of them have been updated recently. Some of them are in the process of being updated. I encourage you to work with emergency management if you aren't already, and making sure that the flood and stormwater and thunderstorm activities that are covered in the hazard mitigation plans, make sure that your projects and your studies and your needs are included in that hazard mitigation plan. It is necessary and critical for that to be included in that plan in order for you to have access to federal funding following a disaster declaration. So that's just one more opportunity for you to work together internally and even with the other communities in your area. And that wraps up the slides I have prepared. I'm open to questions, discussion. I threw a lot at you. There were a lot of words on those slides. I tried, originally, all of this was on PowerPoint, so you're welcome. Gave you a handout instead. What questions do you have for me? We have some time for questions, and I have other resources in the room that I'm going to tap into if your questions are really, really hard. Anybody?
And Stephanie, we did make an effort to put the handout in the chat. We're not sure if everybody has access to that or if Teams would only provide access to COG staff on that.
Yeah, I received some requests for access. I think you just have to follow through and click on it, say request access. Not sure why I can't provide blanket access, so apologies for the extra steps, but I can provide access that way if you just go through and request access.
Thank you. Is any of this information new to you? Oh, yes, Aaron. That's a good question. Oh, sorry. The question was, counties can regulate development or change zoning around certain lakes, certain areas of lakes. And the question is, can they do the same thing for streams? I don't believe that the regulation specified that, but I would need to look into that a little bit further. Do any of our county representatives that are floodplain administrators have any experience with that one? Yes, sir. Will you use the mic that's in? Thank you.
I'm not sure what year it was. I think it's around 99 or 1999, 2000. That went to a vote, and then the legislature created their own subchapter in local government code. And it was we're subchapter K, but all the rest of the subchapters are all lakes. I have not seen any that are on streams.
Okay. Any other questions? We've got a room
Yeah.
full. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I will say, so Denton County, legislatively, we can regulate around Lake Ray Roberts, but it's specific to that lake.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, there are designated areas, even just around that lake, that you're allowed to regulate. I guess when it comes to the streams question that was posed, you can, as a county, adopt higher standards and use the National Flood Insurance Program for the basis of doing that with a court order. So it's not exactly regulating development per se, but you can require development to build at certain elevations. You could require valley storage.
Stephanie, if I might, most of the stormwater construction permits have stream buffer requirements. And so by implementing those regulatory standards, you can kind of, not in a big picture, but on a local level, have some level of influence on what happens along streams.
Thank you, Sue. Anybody else? You've got a room full of resources here. They're waiting to talk. They just are afraid to say. All right.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. So we are way ahead of schedule. We were going to take a break after Stephanie's presentation, but why don't we go ahead and move on to Brendan Wheeler's presentation about transportation resilience in the face of growth, flooding, and limited funding. Brendan is a senior transportation. You are not a senior transportation planner. You are a senior program manager with NCT COG's Transportation Department.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me okay? Speak up so the mic picks me up here. Appreciate being a part of this discussion today. In the Transportation Department, I serve as the Senior Program Manager for Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is our long-range transportation plan for the region. So apologies, I'll be bringing some slides that Stephanie brought as well, just because they're kind of a standard part of my presentation, and I'm not sure how to start a presentation without them. So with that, we'll dive into kind of transportation planning, how that part integrates into some of the discussion we're having here today, especially as we try to integrate stormwater, transportation, and environmental benefits. So kick that off. Just again, some high level discussion points here on the region. It's a very large region, as you all know. Sometimes we don't take credit for the amount of jurisdiction that we have in our area within these counties. A lot of these counties are 30 miles by 30 miles. That's a lot of land to cover. That's a lot of land to be responsible for. This 12 county area within the MPO, within the larger 16 county region of COG, is larger than I think about 13 states or so in land area, and larger than 30-something states in population. So quite a significant feat to be a part of that and to be responsible for all the elements that you guys in county government are responsible for. We are the 4th largest MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization in the region: New York, LA, Chicago, then DFW. But by 2050 on the slide, it says we'll be the 3rd largest. I think it's going to be closer to 2030, somewhere in the early 2030 timeframe, at least based off our current growth rate. So just as a tidbit on statistics, going back to the early 1900s, these are the largest metropolitan areas in the country by 2020 census, and then just trailing those growth rates backwards. Obviously, New York is at the top of the list. You see LA grow quite strongly in the middle of the 1900s, the 20th century there, and then starting to level off toward 2020. Chicago there in green, and DFW, you can see in that orange color, really takes off about 1950 and hasn't looked back since. You can take a lot from this graph. You can see how some of the traditional northeastern cities like Philly and Boston have really leveled off and are in some cases shrinking. You can see how southern cities like DFW, Houston, Miami, and others are growing quite rapidly. But what I think is most interesting about this is more from a sense of comparison. Over the years, we've used the term that Dallas-Fort Worth region is growing at about 1 million people every 7 years. A couple decades ago, we said every 10 years we grow by about 1 million people. Since 2020 till today in 2025, we've actually grown at a rate of 1 million people every 5 years. So we've had 1 million people since COVID. And if you look at this chart, there's only one other major metro that's really shown that kind of sustained growth, and that's LA. LA growing at about 1 million people every 4 years for over 2 decades. And we know what LA looks like today. We know what that growth pattern looks like today. And I would say DFW is primed to replicate that unless we decide to make a difference. So our geography is different than LA. Our soils are different than Southern California. So this is something we have to be very conscious about. We're in a pretty fast growth projection between now and 2050. In fact, here's the official demographic forecast: population and employment expected to be about 12.3 million people by 2050. If you look at the latest growth between 2020 to today, this 12.3 million is actually quite conservative. If we do grow to 1 million people every 5 years, like we have over the last 5 years, it'll be closer to 13 million. So the point being is, regardless of who's right, a conservative or a more progressive forecast, we expect to see a lot of growth, and we're going to have to handle it. The people are coming whether we like it or not. And so with that, how do we develop our infrastructure to be able to handle and be more flexible? And what type of system planning, integrating the needs of stormwater infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, making our dollars go further? How can we incorporate this level of change into our planning? So Stephanie showed you these graphics as well. The only thing I'll note is, as an interesting tidbit here, the breakovers between some of these categories of exurban, suburban, urbanized, urban core. It's a gross oversimplification, but between the suburban and urbanized area, the breakover is about an average of a half an acre residential development. So at the upper edge of suburban, lower edge of urbanized, you'd expect pretty average half acre residential type of developments. Between exurban and suburban, it's closer to a 2 acre average. Again, that's kind of just to give you a mental picture of what some of these blobs represent. And you can, again, equate that to impervious area as you start to think about the level of runoff you'd be experiencing in some of these areas. So by 2050, obviously that grows. That grows quite extensively to the north. It grows to the west, pretty much outside of our urban areas. We're seeing with our latest demographic forecast coming out of this agency, a much stronger push for urban sprawl based off of current trends than even previous COG demographics showed. So I would even say, it was mentioned earlier, the TSI project started prior to this official 2050 forecast, and it forecast out to 2070. In that forecast, it was still a very urban-centric demographic growth, and that still showed a lot of urban sprawl to the west and the northern areas like we were talking about. But we're seeing an actual faster pace of suburbanization out to the west than we even expected, say, 4 or 5 years prior. And again, the change in density, and I don't need to go through this one again. Just some high-level numbers of what this looks like for each county. I've included the small little snippet there of the west study area and the north study area for Dallas-Fort Worth, and the forecast by county, just highlighted in red those counties most included, I guess you could say, within this TSI project area. And those, 5 counties in red add up to about 2 million people over the next 25 years. And considering where the TSI study is, I would expect at least 1.5, close to 2 million people are probably included in that TSI boundary. That's the area that's suburbanizing the fastest, as is closest to the urban area of Fort Worth, Denton, Louisville, and on around the Horn. So from a transportation aspect, this is from our latest long-range transportation plan that was adopted by the Regional Transportation Council. It sits in this room back in June. These are just the major roadway facilities. I'm not going through all the recommendations as a part of the plan, but just to give you a taste of what's in that plan. So by 2050, we are planning to spend close to $200 billion to mitigate the transportation needs of the region. In yellow, I've even included what we call our illustrative list. These are projects that are not included in that fiscally constrained plan, but needs we've identified of these corridors, these areas, these movements have a need for us to look at closer to be able to develop recommendations for future long-range plans. So a lot of these major facility movements are, you can see, are in these more rural areas around the urbanized center of Tarrant County and Denton County on the west, and obviously Dallas and up into Collin County on the east. Make sure I catch up with my notes here. But what I do want to mention is not to get into a metropolitan transportation plan presentation here, but we are seeing a significant funding shortfall. This represents, as I mentioned, the entire plan is over $200 billion. For roadway infrastructure, it's about $100 billion. So a good part of the long-range plan is focused on roadway infrastructure. A lot of that's because that's where the funding streams come from the federal and state governments. They're tagged with funding for roadways. But even that doesn't go far enough to capture the roadway need for the region. And I'll mention this as well, especially as you go out into some of these rural areas, in areas that we don't have identified funding to be able to support capacity increases, new roadways, those kinds of things. You're going to be touching these roadways once, maybe twice, if you're lucky, over the next 25 years. So the goal, I think, that we're trying to communicate through this workshop is, as you're tackling demand issues, which are many and the supply is limited, can we also find ways to integrate some of the findings of this study as it comes to stormwater and where those two sectors intersect, for us to be able to solve two problems at once: the growing suburbanization, the growing impervious areas, along with the needs for transportation for this growing population. Are we able to touch these facilities once and not have to retroactively come back later to find out that a facility that we just built 5-10 years ago is now causing flooding issues upstream, or it's being flooded itself? So to reterm or kind of refocus some of the goals of the TSI study, again, from a transportation planning perspective, are we able to minimize the overall life cycle costs and return on investment of some of these mitigation strategies is part of the focus of the TSI study, providing some tools to you guys in county government to be able to consider what these life cycle costs are, so you can better make the case for asset management. You can better make the case for investing, diversifying your limited finances into those facilities that bring you the best bang for your buck, those facilities that allow you to continue developing in certain areas without the impending doom of potential flooding that it could create, or it could sustain itself. Additionally, this study will help to identify and address existing and future vulnerable assets. As you start planning out your roadway system, you can start identifying where you're going to have problems and potentially mitigate that with design and investment, as I just mentioned. Looking to decrease flood risk and provide other benefits, as Kate and others will mention throughout the study. But part of the goal here is, are we able to, again, identify those facilities that need more attention and turn them from liabilities into flood mitigation assets? Are we able to use the roadway system to support what we're trying to do in stormwater and flood risk mitigation? One of the initial aspects of the study that we're looking at currently is developing a regional mapping system to identify existing and future susceptible facilities. So I wouldn't take these actual facilities at face value with the colors we've labeled of high susceptibility, low susceptibility. This is still very much a work in progress, but the intent is to show the deliverables of this study will help us focus our attention on the areas that need the most attention, on the areas that may require different strategies than others. So as we go from the current portfolio of our roadway assets to where we expect the future roadway assets to be, on top of where that future impervious areas based off of the land uses we expect. And that's very much an iterative thing. So I wouldn't take COG's official demographic forecast for gospel. This is something that we intend to communicate back and forth with the communities where you're seeing different development patterns. You can feed that back into our model, and we're able to produce a result that can, again, communicate back, well, these are the implications of those types of development patterns. So, and I would add for the susceptibility portion, we'll talk here about vulnerability in a second, but susceptibility in the term we're using it here, and this is something that's trickling up within the TSI study team. Some of these concepts are a little, get batted around quite often in the working groups. But this is really kind of looking at the sensitivity of certain facilities to flooding. The vulnerability is a different analysis, a little more infrastructure specific, location specific, elevations of the facility. If it's a low-lying facility, if it's a single roadway facility that has access to a community or to an area of special interest, if that gets flooded, then there's certain vulnerability implications. So being able, with this study, we're looking to not only map out both of these dynamics, but then overlay the two so that we're able to identify which areas are highly susceptible and which facilities within those areas are highly vulnerable, so we can target, again, not only existing but future facilities where we think our limited funding can go further. So here's some, just again, some brainstorming questions. These may be questions you're asking us or questions we're asking you, but kind of to help us frame this discussion around transportation planning of we're trying to identify at a regional scale what we think are vulnerable facilities. But at a local scale, you're obviously much more familiar with the existing facilities that you have, which roadways tend to get overtopped, which roadways are under maintenance and may need more attention. So being able to break silos, which we'll talk about here in a second, and be able to have those communications back and forth to be able to inventory those facilities and then determine strategies is an important part of this project. Where are the pinch points in a watershed that play a more significant role? We talk about development. I think Stephanie hit on some really good points about what the county has authority to do. And as developments grow, as we're seeing more of a monolithic type of residential rooftops development, which is a pretty significant impact on all of our infrastructure, not just stormwater or transportation, but water, sewer, and all the other infrastructure that is required to chase residential subdivisions out into, the Red River and toward Abilene and beyond. How are we able to equip counties with better data, better information, better decision-making tools, and the authority to go out and do what you need to do to still attract that development, but to plan it in a more balanced approach. And as I mentioned, from a silo busting standpoint, this study is all about silo busting. We talk about it often at COG, even between departments, between all the work that we do. How are we able to integrate what each entity is doing to better maximize the work we're trying to do in the public sector? And that includes cross-discipline across stormwater, transportation, other infrastructure. That includes between jurisdictions. How are we able to better communicate with TxDOT as they're building a roadway? And as we've done a study on a flood basin where their roadway is crossing, to be able to integrate into their roadway design better detention or storm drainage conveyance facilities as they're building their project. So silo busting across jurisdictions, and then finally strategies. moving from traditional to finding innovative. And I think this TSI project is looking to really find what those innovative strategies are. So just a couple quick examples. I'm by no means the expert on these. Some of you in the room may be experts on this, but just to highlight a couple silo busting examples. US 377 in Granbury, I mentioned TxDOT looking to, again, expand this facility from a demand standpoint. This is just west of Lake Granbury. So coordinating between the city, probably the county, TxDOT. There was evidence of flooding there to the north of 377. So instead of just conveying the water, and building a bigger culvert, the decision was made, look, from a holistic perspective, it'd be much better for the community north of 377 for us to move the water to the lake via the transportation facility along 377. And thereby you're able to remove 74 properties from the 100-year floodplain. So a great example of silo busting and thinking outside the box, outside of this is my right of way, this is my project, and partnering across between the state, the city, and the locals to be able to make this happen. Another example is a planning effort that COG's been involved in. Forest Hill Drive. It's a little bit of an orphan facility between the city of Fort Worth, Forest Hill, Everman, and several smaller communities. So we jumped in to do some planning to get this project moving forward, and found that through the process, Tignall Perkins with the city of Everman had been looking at some improvements to a particular creek because of the flooding experienced in the area. And so being able to integrate the improvements along Forest Hill and the proposed improvements for this creek, I think we're going to find a lot of synergies here that we're going to be able to maximize the use of our dollars to be able to solve both problems at once. So finally, there may be others in the group that use this picture. I stole it from a TSI presentation. Just a very pretty picture of how it can all come together. But the point is as we silo bus, we can truly find a way to make the infrastructure work for us and be able to work in tandem with both the environment and the high growth we're experiencing in our region. So it really leads me to the last question, again, from a transportation planning perspective, but this starts to cross a lot of other areas as well, is so how are we planning to grow? And forgive me for this graphic. It's not a pendulum like I wanted it to be, but imagine a pendulum. The pendulum swung really far toward a land use focused, private developer focused approach where it's a catch as catch can. Infrastructure, transportation is reactive. Water is reactive. Stormwater is reactive. And how can we bring this back to the middle of the pendulum where it's a much more balanced approach, where you still favor a free market economy, right? This is still Texas, right? But you're able to do so in a system planning way where the public entities have the right tools to plan out the right approach that they would like for development, for infrastructure, and to be able to focus their limited funding where it's going to do the most good. So with that, happy to taking questions or move on to the next section as we need to. Yes.
Togi, I had a question about measurement that you were using on one of your maps, the page before you talked about silos, where you were showing inundation of transportation roadways. What was the metric you were using for volume? Yes, right there, where you have volume. A volume of what? Is it cars or?
Yes, this is traffic, so roadway needs.
Thank you.
So better understanding which roadways are of higher use, therefore higher need, to make sure those are probably addressed first as you go down the list of funding availability.
Thank you.
Yes, these are daily. And again, this is, very high level. I wouldn't even trust the breaks we have currently. We'll probably refine this as the study goes forward, but this is just kind of initial swipe at how do we look at this data and how do we learn to use this data to inform decisions. And I will mention, if you have any questions, Jeff Neal is probably the best person to ask questions to. He's running more lead on this study. I'm kind of stepping in to help out. But yeah, after the workshop, happy to take any other questions as well.
So we did schedule a break into this workshop because we realized 3 hours is a long time to ask folks to sit still. We are going to take that break at this time. It is 2:20, but please do rejoin us at 2:30 because we have some excellent presentations. Chad Davis will discuss the excellent work that is going on in Wise County. Lissa Shepard will be presenting on Dallas County, and Jelaine Carper is joining us. She is from the Collin County Soil and Water Conservation District. So folks in the room, yes, please get up, get beverages, take a break. Folks online, please rejoin us at 2:30.